Hi, welcome to this series of video lectures designed to support students of PSY 6011 and 6012 at Alliant International University. In this presentation, we will define key terms that are fundamental to an understanding of statistics and research design. The concept of a variable is fundamental to how we study our ideas. Perhaps we think that two variables are correlated with each other, or we may suspect that subgroups of a variable will differ when measured on another variable. Quite simply, a variable is something capable of varying in value. For example, if we are interested in a concept like the emotion anger, one of our first realizations is that some people experience more anger than other people. So in this sense, anger would be considered a variable because it varies in value. In another example, when we think of a concept like socioeconomic status, we might say that it ranges from lower class to middle class to upper class. Because it can vary in value, it is also a variable. At a minimum, a variable must have at least two values. In most studies, gender is a variable with two levels or two values, men and women. Frequently, researchers will take concepts that vary in nature, but restrict that variable to a single level in a specific study. For example, you will see many studies in which men and women are two values for the variable gender. But if a researcher limited their study to only men, then gender would not be a variable in the study. It would be a constant. In another example, we might think we can categorize people as having low, moderate, and high levels of anger, but in a specific study, we may only include participants with high levels of anger, thus making anger a constant in the study. Let's continue talking about variables by using an example. In studies, researchers record values on variables in a database such as SPSS or SAS, from which they will later do statistical analyses. In SPSS, variables are reported in the columns of the spreadsheet, and the participants in a study, sometimes called cases or subjects, are reported in the rows. Although it is possible to write words for the values of some variables in SPSS, most researchers will assign numbers to the values of a variable. In this data set, male participants were coded as 0 and female participants were coded as 1. Using that coding, we can see that the first two participants are men, and participants 103 and 104 are women, and participant 105 is a man. In this example, we see what a database might look like if gender was a constant in a study. Note that all participants are men. Because gender does not vary in this study, it is a constant. Researchers will make concepts that vary in nature into constants in their studies in order to improve experimental control. Although this reduces error in a study, it limits the generalizability of the findings. In this example, the results of the study may not be generalizable to women. Because we can only do statistical procedures on variables, constants are not usually entered into a database. Variables come in two types. They are either continuous or categorical. Continuous variables are those that result in a score. So a participant's value on a continuous variable is represented by a score or a rating. For example, we could ask participants how many years they attended school, which could result in a number from 0 to 20, for example. We could also ask, what was your income last year? Or we could ask, how many items did you get correct on the test last week? All of these variables are continuous because the value for the variable results in a score. Here we return to our sample database and enter the continuous variable of education. The first participant is a man who completed 20 years of education. And the second participant, number 102, is a man who completed 12 years of education. In contrast to continuous variables, categorical variables result in the classification of an individual into one of several predefined categories. We can call the predefined categories levels. So earlier, we considered a categorical variable gender as having two levels, men or women. We could define the same variables discussed in the previous slides using categorical variables. For example, we could ask participants about their education by asking them to place themselves into one of several categories, such as less than high school education, high school graduate, some college, a bachelor's degree, some graduate school, a master's degree, and so on. Similarly, we could ask participants' income by classifying them as earning less than $50,000, between $50,000 and $100,000, between $100,000 and $150,000, and so on. And we could ask about the test last week by asking if you got an A, B, C, D, or F. Here we return to our sample data set and enter the education of our participants as a categorical variable. Now, participant 101 is a man with a PsyD or PhD, and participant 102 is a man who is a high school graduate. I will point out once again that researchers will often enter categorical variables using a number code. We will learn later that merely using a numbering system does not change a categorical variable to a continuous variable. From time to time in these presentations, we will receive notices from the National Statistics Alert System, or an NS Alert. These alerts will draw your attention to key ideas that we will see over and over again in empirical research and statistics. In experimental research, we will create a control group to compare the experience of the experimental group with. The control group and the experimental groups are levels of the same variable. It is a mistake to think of the control group as a variable. Rather, it is a level of a variable. We will learn about the experimental group by comparing their experience on certain variables to the experience of individuals in the control group.